Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices. Secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you, good night, and God bless America.
21 years ago today on 9/11, and those news clips and those reports, they still just bring me to tears. And Millzer, that was a day that robbed a lot of people of their childhood. 9/11, the day that you woke up to what was really happening in the world, and a really tough day for a lot of people. A lot of people know exactly where they were, know exactly what they were doing. Where were you?
Well, it's kind of I didn't even know what was going on. I was working at the Riverdale Mill in Selma, international paper, working in the warehouse. About 10 o'clock, one of the supervisors comes down and says, "Hey, look, guys, somebody's airplane ran into one of the buildings down in New York, and they're having a big to-do about it." That was all that was told to us. So we went on about our work day like nothing was going, because you got to realize this was 2001. There was no cell phones. There was no internet. There was no. Nobody got messages. You didn't get information instantaneously back then. So I had no idea. And I listen to CDs. I don't listen to the radio. I'm getting off work. I'm driving. I know nothing about this until I walk into about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I had no idea it had happened. Nothing. And that in itself is like just a surreal feeling, because it's like, wait a minute, the whole world changed. And I'm driving a fork truck and never even knew it happened. I mean, you really start to think about things like that. It's like, what, And so honestly, it wasn't that long after that I've changed my career. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say that was the reason, but it was on my mind, because I'm like, I'm in this warehouse. The whole world changed. I didn't even know what happened.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, and like I said, we just had one supervisor come down, and I don't even know if he knew. I don't think so. You wonder if like, oh, they didn't tell us anything because they wanted us to keep working, that kind of thing. And I don't want to think that of them, and I really don't, because they were all good people. But that's just the way things were back then. You didn't have the access to information you got now. Nobody had a TV to watch what was going on, or had the internet to update them or anything. We were just kept on working.
And there was no thought that anything like that was even remotely possible.
No.
I was a student at Auburn, and going into senior year, and it was the week of the Auburn LSU game, and me and my buddies were getting ready to travel down to Baton Rouge for a road game that Saturday. And this was a Tuesday morning. And we got up, turned on the TV, and turned on ESPN Sports Center, and this was on Sports Center. The tower's on fire. And they're saying these things like Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, and we're going, what is an Al-Qaeda? I've never even heard of something like that. Nobody had ever even, those words didn't mean anything to anybody at the time. And so it was a day that just changed everything. And our guest today knows that all too well. Our guest today on the Preferred Experience is Pete and Denise Groghan, and these are my beloved neighbors, and I've gotten to know them over the years, but I didn't know this about them until just recently. I'm having a conversation with Pete on my porch one afternoon, and 9/11 somehow came up in the conversation. Remember this? And I was like, gosh, you remember where you were that day? And Pete said, "Oh, most people can remember the word. It's a day I really want to forget." And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "I was working at the Pentagon on 9/11. It was in the building." And wow, Pete, you tell me about that. Just started just putting the hairs on the back of my neck on end. So welcome to the show. And I'm really glad that you and your wife, your lovely wife, Denise, could be here with us today to kind of tell us about what that day was really like from somebody on the inside. So, Pete, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Okay, so 9/11, I was a major for the Marine Corps, working at headquarters Marine Corps. And the day started out like any day. We had a meeting in our office. I did budget stuff, aviation budget stuff for the Marine Corps. So we had a meeting in our office talking about things. And my wife Denise called me from, I guess whatever the time was that the first plane hit the Trade Center. She called me and said, "Hey, have you heard that a plane just hit the World Trade Center?" So we kind of paused our meeting, and we at least did have internet. It was slow, but we had internet. So at that time, the only news you could get was CNN. And we were trying to pull up CNN and see what was going on, because we were all pilots. So we thought, well, maybe it was just, we're thinking a Cessna got off, did something stupid. Mm-hmm. And then so it finally came up, but because everybody was trying to get it. The site crashed, so all we could see was, it looked like a plane hit it. Shortly after that, we reconvened our meeting and then heard a big boom and the building shook.
Wow.
And our office had just been renovated, but literally dust kind of fell from the ceiling. We're going, okay. We weren't that far from the helipad where they would drop VIPs off. So we were thinking, did a helo crash? Was there a car bomb nearby? What's going on? And then all of a sudden, everybody, the fire alarm started going off. And my workmates and I, we run towards danger, not away from it. So
Right.
we went out, started to go where you could see the smoke coming, and fortunately, unfortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, more senior officers just told us to get out of the building. Just leave, just get out and get your people accounted for. So my boss was actually, my office was in the second ring from the outside. Now I forget what their letter, and I forget which one it was. But I was literally around the corner from where the plane hit. My boss was in a meeting with the general, and his office was almost literally right next to it. And so we got our stuff, got down into the parking lot, and as soon as we went outside, you could smell aviation fuel. And for pilots, they know what that smells like. They know what burning aviation fuel is like. So we immediately kind of looked around to see maybe a helicopter did crash. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But you could see the big hole in the side of the building going, oh, this is not good. This is not good at all. I did have a cell phone. It was about the size of a brick. And I was able to call Denise.
I think it was a flip phone.
Yeah.
To be exact.
Yeah. but
Large
a large-
StarTAC flip
Flip
phone.
a large, yeah. And all I was able to get up with her, and all I could say before the phone went dead was, it just blew up.
Wow. Wow.
So she had no idea if I was alive or dead. And it was just very surreal because we're out there, you see people everybody outside in the parking lot gathering, gawking, what's going on. I vividly remember I don't remember what branch of service he was in, but some guy went to his car. He was a volunteer fireman. He pulled out his fire gear and started running. And I just thought that was that's surreal. What are you going to do? There's no hoses, but he.
It's heroic.
Yeah. So eventually I finally met up with my boss, and my other workmates decided that, hey, we're going to go, we're leaving. We're just going to get home because there's nothing for us to do. So I met up with my boss. We confirmed that our other two office mates I had accounted for them. They left. And then he said, then we got word, hey, there's another plane coming, which
Right.
later found out it was the one they crashed
United 93.
in Pennsylvania. So the police, everybody said, okay, move to Crystal City. So you had this large gaggle of people trying to cross interstates and roads to get over towards Crystal City because they didn't want a huge mass casualty if there was another plane coming because they didn't know. So we started making our way over towards Crystal City. And at that time, the Pentagon, the cleaning staff or the janitorial staff in the Pentagon were folks who were mentally challenged. And we ran into a group of them, and they were, I don't know if you can edit this out if you have to, they were scared shitless.
Yeah.
Because their handlers were nowhere to be found. They were literally in a group, just scared out of their minds, not knowing what was going on. So my boss and I tried to corral them and get them at least over to Crystal City because they didn't want to move. And we're crossing roads with fire trucks coming down, police cars. It was, to this day, I am surprised that no one was hit by a first responder, because you had all these people trying to get over to Crystal City, all these first responders trying to get there, and how no one got hit is beyond me.
Why were the cleaning crew at the Pentagon, why were they special needs people?
I don't know. I'm assuming it's just a contract that.
It makes a lot of sense if you think about it.
Yeah, that sounds like some kind of program. Because my sister, it wasn't anything military, but Pizza Hut had where they hired mentally challenged people from the Smith Center here in Prattville, and she worked there for 20 years.
Yeah.
So I would imagine it was some kind of employment program for them.
Well, there's so many. I mean, that is where all the major branches of the military's headquarters is, right? The Pentagon, right there. I imagine there's a boatload of cigarettes, and as you go deeper into the rings, like from E ring all the way down to A ring, they all have to be cleaned. And I imagine there's all sorts of things that people do not need to know. So if you have the mentally challenged cleanup crew, they're not going to be digging for secrets.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know. I just knew they were there during the day because.
I'll be willing to bet the deeper you go into rings, it was probably a little more.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When you got down to OSD level and SecDef level, it was probably different set of crew. But we had secret stuff. We had secret computers. We had a but like I said, I don't know.
But you're right. They they're a lot of them probably mentally couldn't understand what was going on, and probably.
It's the perfect role.
Yeah.
It could be.
Those are long, wide corridors that just go forever and ever.
And you could just, before 9/11, you could just walk right in.
You still needed a badge, and coming in the one gate I always came in. This was before. All the ID cards had computer chips, so it just had the magnetic strip on it. You had to swipe your card to walk through a turnstile, it turned green, and even getting off the metro, if you took the metro in, you'd get off, and before you could go up the escalators, you had to swipe a badge. But there were no guards that I recall at the metro station. There were guards at the other entrances, but it was. Anyways, it was what it was, and I think at this point I'll let Denise start.
Yeah, Denise, you had a massive role in this as well. When Pete calls you and says it just blew up, and then the line goes dead, what's going through your mind?
Well, I was working at a private school in Old Town, Alexandria. Mm-hmm. So I had about 125 students. 95% of those students' parents worked at the Pentagon.
Wow.
Had some role at the Pentagon. So, of course, my first thought was, what about my kids? Because our kids were in private school in Maryland. So my first thing was to pick up the phone and call the school in Maryland and go, hey, this is what's going on. Please make sure that our children are kind of unaware, because they were not all military children. Mm-hmm. They had, there were a lot of civilian children that were also students at the private school where they attended. So I wanted to make sure that they knew something was going on with the military families that were at the Pentagon. Of course, then all the phone calls started coming in, so I had to field all the phone calls for all the other parents. So we prepared the students to exit for the day, getting them all ready, helping make sure that they didn't know what was going on. So that was really hard when you're trying to prepare kindergarten through 8th graders. Why are we going home at before lunch?
Right.
And
trying to keep from panicking.
Yeah. Well, I think we did a really good job, because none of our students, maybe some of the older ones, kind of got a feel for something going on, because one of the older classes did have a TV in their room that they used for cultural events. So they had they may have heard something going on. None of them had cell phones.
That's amazing.
So that getting them all home kind of kept my mind off the last words that he said to me was, it's blowing up.
Yeah.
Of course, I did have a cell phone. It was a bag phone. So, it was a brick in a bag.
Brick in a bag, yeah.
And I'm trying to call my parents and his parents. Mm-hmm. And of course, at this time, all the lines were, you couldn't get a call out.
Right.
On a landline. So I was trying to get a call on a cell phone. So I was trying to call people that would call people that would have numbers that could get in touch with our families.
Back in the days of the old phone tree.
Yeah, yeah. So I was able to get a call through to his parents. It was a short call, but I couldn't tell him anything because I didn't know. Mm-hmm. I didn't know anything, and wow. it was. I think it was about 1:00 in the afternoon when I found out that he was at his boss's house, which was close to Crystal City.
With the attacks that morning on the Pentagon at 9:37, and you don't know anything until 1:00 in the afternoon, that had to have been just gut-wrenching till you knew for sure. I mean, It's the unthinkable. It's the unthinkable, and it's just happened. And there was I was looking the other day at the timeline of 9/11. 8:46, the North Tower is attacked. 9:03, the South Tower is attacked. 9:37, the Pentagon is attacked. So there was 34 minutes between the first two towers being attacked and the Pentagon. And so they're tracking this plane coming into Washington. But nobody knows where it's going to go. It could go to the White House. It could go to the Capitol. It could go to the Washington Monument. It could go anywhere. And none of those buildings were nearly as populated at the time as the Pentagon was. So they knew exactly where to go. And at what point before 9/37 did anybody in the Pentagon think, this could be us, we need to get out of here?
I can only, we had a friend that went to church with us. We went to church in Falls Church, and he worked for the Marine Corps, but his office was in the Navy Annex. But he had been down in the Pentagon that day for a meeting and was actually walking back up the hill to the Navy Annex when the plane came in. Because his comment was, "That plane's really low. Why is it so low?" And turned around, he watched it hit.
535 miles per hour.
Yeah,
because we're right there, at the Potomac. Mm-hmm. Reagan National is right across on the Potomac, and we lived at Bowling Air Force Base, which was
across
Potomac, literally right across from Reagan. So we saw planes come and go at low altitudes all the time.
This was normal.
It was normal, but the direction that this one was coming was not normal.
Yeah, that's the only person I know of that actually saw the plane before it hit.
And there's so little footage of that even happening because closed circuit TV, the closed circuit cameras that were all around the Pentagon were only picking up like one frame per second, and this thing's coming through it at top speed, over top speed. So a lot of these conspiracy theorists will say, well, look, you can't even see a plane. You just see this thing streak in and it blows up. It had to have been maybe a missile attack or something. But there are eyewitnesses on the ground that actually saw this happen, and the smell of jet fuel and plane parts scattered everywhere. And people want to make up their own narratives, but you saw it.
Well, I mean, I didn't see the plane, but I was there when it happened.
Right.
I know what I know. And, most missiles don't use jet fuel.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And jet fuel, it's, when it burns, has a very distinctive smell. And that's what we smelled when we were outside. So let me pick back up my side.
Yeah.
When I met up my boss, we got to Crystal City. As Denise said, he lived about 3 miles from the Pentagon. So he said, well, let's walk to my house. Because we didn't know if landlines were up or not, but he said, at least you can try to get up with your wife and she can come pick you up. Because
they weren't letting anybody back in the building.
Yeah.
And Marines don't keep keys in their pockets.
Yeah, so I had so literally the only thing I had on my body.
Coolest uniform in the armed services, but no room for keys.
Well, or wallet.
Keys were not authorized.
All I had was my ID card. That's all we carried. And my car keys, everything else was in my office. So we walked 3 miles or so to his house, and we got there, he turned on the TV, and that's when I think it really hit what was going on, because by then the towers had fallen, and we're just watching that, and I think at one point we saw a second tower fall live. It's been 20-some years, but we're just watching that, and he was originally from New Jersey, so but we couldn't believe what was going on. This just doesn't look real. I mean, because you're going.
At what point did it just sink into you? We're under attack.
Probably, I think, at his house when we act, because again, when we left, we didn't know the damage to the Pentagon.
Yeah,
all you could see was a hole in a fire.
Right.
And most people didn't know about the Twin Towers at that time.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it because,
you're in meetings, you're going on with daily life, and
like I said, there weren't cell phones. You couldn't pick up, anything. So, and you weren't in a car to hear, because, I mean, where I parked my car, had every parking lot, everything around the Pentagon turned into a crime scene. So our stuff was impounded for over a week before I could ever get my car back.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That is wild.
Well, I mean, it becomes an investigation,
Definitely. Having never been through that, you're going, I need to get my car. Sorry. You got to wait till, FBI and everybody clears it.
I mean, because
so you've got.
Is there a secondary device, or is there? I mean, there's a million once the seal's broken, then it's like you got anything's possible.
Sure, absolutely, because
because you're talking about the number of people in the Pentagon that all of their cars were now inaccessible to them.
Right.
They had no way to get.
And a lot of them aren't living close to the Pentagon.
No.
So there was.
They're in Virginia. They're down Quantico. They're Maryland.
There was. I mean, it was. All I know is my two coworkers lived south of Quantico, or in that area, and they managed to get home. So, but anybody else, I don't know.
Wow.
And the other, so as Denise said, we lived at Bowling Air Force Base, so there was a contingent of Navy and Marine Corps officers kind of on our street, because Bowling Air Force Base at that time was one of the military bases where if you were stationed at the Pentagon, regardless of service, you could live in base housing. So that's what we did. And I don't think it was until the next day where we confirmed that everybody made it home. There was one, and I didn't know this individual. There was a warrant officer who supposedly was up in New York in one of the towers when the plane hit, and it took days before his family found out if he was alive.
Wow, my goodness.
And I don't know what he did, but he lived there at Bowling, and that was the big thing after we confirmed that, hey, everybody who worked over there was home except this one guy. But so anyway, finally got through a landline call to Denise and told her, okay, hey, I'm alive. Just I'm alive, and we made arrangements for her to drive to his house and come pick me up.
Before Google Maps, before Waze, before Route Me,
MapQuest. Maybe you get a printout.
Yeah.
No. We had the Rad McNally.
or there was another map booklet called Thompson's Maps.
Map.
And
I remember Rand McNally clearly.
Turn left at the McDonald's.
Yeah.
It was a big, thick book, and he's trying to tell me how to find it. And of course, all of the interstate systems were just that you couldn't get. I mean, they were jammed. Mm-hmm. So it was taking all the back roads through Old Town and then Alexandria and then around.
Well, that brings a question to me. I've never really heard it touched on or anything, but was there a sense of like people were trying to get out of Washington? as
cannot-
far as
I-
as far
I
as
can't-
traffic, why
I
as far
can't-
as the traffic and
I
everything?
can't speak to southbound because I had to go northbound because I lived across the river. Literally, my house to the Pentagon, as a crow flies, was about 8 miles, but it would take me 45 minutes leaving at 5 in the morning because of all the traffic, and a good hour and a half to 2 hours to get home. But where he lived, there were only 2 bridges to get across the Potomac. At the time, there was a Woodrow Wilson Bridge, and then you could go across the Memorial Bridge, which would bring you over by the Lincoln Memorial. Then you'd have to go through D.C. to get to the base. Well, we were, I think, probably east, if I'm looking at a map correctly, thinking about a map, east of the Pentagon, and to have to go back by the Pentagon to get to Memorial Bridge just wasn't going to happen because I think it was 295 went between the Pentagon and Arlington. That was closed down. They weren't letting it, so the only way to go was the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. But I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to remember the news. I don't recall there being a big. I mean, those people had cars, were heading home. But
because I've never really heard that touched on, but I've always thought about it. Because let's be honest, folks will panic in a situation like that, and then, hey, let's get out of the city.
Everybody was panicking. I mean, here in Alabama, in Auburn, where I was, and in my parents in Montgomery, there was just mass panic. People were losing their mind. They're buying gas and toilet paper because that's what you do when you panic. You just go buy toilet paper. And so there was a run on all these things, and I can only imagine what it was like being that close to the epicenter of one of these attacks. How the panic must have been setting in. I mean, looking back at the timeline, the Pentagon's attacked at 9:37, and at 9:59 a.m. that morning, Richard Clark comes on the airwaves, the National Security Council counterterrorism coordinator, and says, "We have a plan. We have trained people. We exercise it regularly that if Washington isn't around, the U.S. government continues." So even they had to be thinking, we don't know what's about to happen next. And then at 10:03, 93 crashes near Shanksville, headed toward D.C. And that was the other plane that was headed in that the Beamer boys took down, by the grace of God. And then at 10:15, the E-ring facing west of the Pentagon collapses, and shortly after that, the South Tower collapses. And nobody knows what's going to happen next.
And I mean, what I recall when I got to my bosses, it was basically, hey, they wanted everybody off the roads. They wanted people on the roads because
they were going to institute a curfew.
They just didn't know how many additional first responders, fire units. I mean, there was talk, HMX flies the president around. Mm-hmm. Well, the president was at that time, in Arkansas. I forget the name of the Air Force base, but I think that's where he ended up landing. And of course, the FAA, shut the airspace down.
First time ever.
Yeah, but I don't recall a lot of people who actually lived in D.C. saying we need to get out because they were basically told everything had shut down.
Everything stopped.
So if you were planning on using the metro, a lot of stuff was being shut down because, again, nobody knew what was going to happen next. But so I think people were just trying to get to their house. And
when I was able to finally connect with him, and then we started trying to make our way home.
So just from a time perspective, that was probably about 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Because it took you, because we got to his house, probably close to lunchtime ish, and I want to say it was. We were there for hours before you showed up.
Yeah, just trying to navigate and get through, and roads blocked, and traffic, and people not knowing what was going on. Some of the power was out, so traffic lights were down. But then when I was able to find him, and we were able to get to an interstate. The one thing that I just remember, I was driving because he didn't have his driver's license, was, of course, the movie back in the day, The Night of the Living Dead.
Right.
Do you remember?
I do.
Just the dazed look on people. People were walking in the roads. The roads were filled with people I remember we stopped asking people. I was in a minivan, and we were stopping trying to get people to get in the car. Do you need a ride? Can we help you? Where can you go? And
We're heading to bowling. Anybody need to go bowling?
no one took us up on our offer to get in the car with us. But that's what only thing that I can wrap my mind around. That is what it was like.
People just walking around
People
in
just
absolute
dazed,
shock and daze.
and just walking.
Yeah.
Just walking.
Oh my goodness.
And so it was probably about, I don't know, 3 or 4 in the afternoon, but I finally got on the road to head to bowling.
We live 8 miles as a crow flies.
Yeah.
Right.
But we had no idea what was going on with our
With
children.
our children, who were 11 and 13.
So,
That's old enough to start to figure things out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that something's not right.
Because yeah. So, talking with them, when they left the school, they knew what was going on. Because the Air Force provided transportation, and when they got on the bus, this is what they told us. When they got on the bus, they actually had armed guards on the bus with them. So
When they got to the gate of the base.
And that's not normal.
that's not normal when you have someone with an M16 in full, as we call it, battle rattle.
Right. I like that.
But that's also, I think, when they knew something's going on.
And when they're standing there asking you for your ID card to prove that you're
You're supposed
supposed to be
spot.
there with a gun.
With M16 ready for
not
battle.
on your back like they're normally used to seeing them,
But
Like
in
in
front
your
of
hand.
you.
Yeah.
Yes.
ready to roll.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, it was, I don't know, we got fine. Well, so part of the problem, we finally made it to 495, which is the ring that goes around D.C.
Is that what they call the Beltway?
Yeah, that's the Beltway. So we finally got to the Beltway and started heading towards the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. And we were literally in a parking lot for some of that time because, I don't know if you recall, but there was rumors that, they planted explosives on all the bridges. So,
Right.
so you had the Coast Guard, you had everybody out there checking bridges out.
The rumors went nuts.
Yeah, and they opened it up for a while, then they'd close it down because somebody else said, I saw something, or whatever. But it took us 4 or 5 hours to get
It was
home.
9 o'clock
9 p.m.
Yeah, so
before you saw your kids.
to go 8 miles.
and we didn't know, where they were.
We had no idea where they were.
So
We had no communication with.
How terrifying is that?
well, to me it wasn't terrifying. It was just concerning because I knew that they were being taken care of some way.
Spoken like a Marine over here.
We knew their DOD
Was it
pendants. It was a DOD bus.
Yeah.
They could only go one place, and
Right.
that was home. Where they were once they got on the base, we don't know where, but we knew that they were getting to the base. So we had confidence in knowing that.
Well, you had the United States military
Yeah.
protecting your
Yeah.
kids.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
were probably the safest.
What a blessing.
Yeah.
Of
So, and-
anybody in that area, they were probably the most safest of anybody.
yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's just we had no clue because again, it's not something that's ever discussed. Hey, if there's this, attack, where do you go pick your kids up?
Yeah.
It's not.
Because this doesn't happen.
Exactly. It's not something.
Nobody attacks with an airplane.
Right.
Much less the largest airplane in our commercial fleet coming right up in your doorstep.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen.
But at the time, does the thought of a secondary attack come into your head? I mean, how much does that play into your head? Like, okay, once y'all get to that night, you're like, okay, is this just round one? What's coming tomorrow?
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that. We'll
There's
get
more.
to that. We'll get to that because
We're just getting warmed up here.
That night got very interesting. So we finally made it on the base. We actually went to our house first. Went over to our neighbors. Where are the kids at? And they're at I forget what it was called, but like the Child Development Center or something like that. So we had to go over there and pick them up.
Because they wouldn't release them they would only release them to their parent.
Yeah, so we had to show who we were, had to show IDs. Okay, you can take your kids. So it was, after 9, by the time the kids got to the house. But the interesting thing for me, and and I'm used to, people with weapons, but you come through the gate, and they had set up temporary machine gun posts.
Wow.
At the gate. So not only you're being, the first time ever that I recall that they come into the gate, show IDs, and they actually went under my car with a mirror.
Mm-hmm.
First time it ever happened. I'm in uniform and said, okay, I get it, I understand. And then you drive by this, machine. I had two, one on each side of the street. Machine, M60 set up.
And they were pointing them at you.
Yeah.
It wasn't
giving
just,
you the
hey,
business
how are
end.
you?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't just like we're standing next to it. No, there was
they were behind
They
it.
were manned.
You make a
and
false move, and
they were sandbagged up and everything. It was like
unbelievable.
Our bowling is a really small Air Force base, extremely small. It's like a big rectangle.
Mm-hmm.
On one end, you have what was the name of the Navy?
No, well, bowling is also the headquarters of was it NSA or Naval Intelligence, whatever? Or not?
The language school.
No, you had a big I think DIA, if I recall, Defense Intelligence Agency headquarters was there. So that was a big building. You had a bunch of general officers who lived there, and then
HMX was on the far
you had
end.
Anacostia Naval Air Station, which is where HMX was when they had aircraft there when they had presidential missions to do. So we get home that night, make sure the kids are okay, talk to them about what had happened, and then our house, we lived in a townhouse, but had windows that looked, or sliding glass door, that looked out on the Potomac.
With Reagan right across the
And every once in a while,
Potomac.
you'd see an armed sentry start. There was a walking path, bicycle path that went along the river, and there was a guy out there walking. I just thought that's when it was really eerie, because here you had some Air Force airmen out there, marching his post with an M16 all night long, back and forth.
On the bank of the Potomac.
Yeah.
Safest place in the world, conceivably, and now he's marching it with an M16.
Yeah, because, again,
Because we don't know.
Well, because of all the rumors, right?
Right.
Oh, there's going to be they're going to bring in small boats, and they're going to, because they know, again, one of the rumors, you find out this after the fact, right? But they knew that what was located at bowling, a lot of general officers, high value targets, if they were going to try to do something, that.
Because didn't you say that was where the naval intelligence was?
Not naval. I think it was.
Defense intelligence.
I think it was defense intelligence.
Yeah.
I could be wrong,
Which
but
it still is that's a prime high value
Right.
target.
Yes.
right. And you had some high ranking general officers. I think. I don't know if the Air Force Chief of Staff lived there or not, but you had general officers.
But
of all
that
ranks.
level of command structure was there.
Yeah. So.
And at this point, you have no idea who's launching this attack, and it could be coordinated. A country coordinating. Okay, we're going to do this, and then the next step is this, and the next step is this.
Well, and again, rumors are rumors, but it was, well, if they could do it in airplanes, who's to say they don't have a bunch of other people here who are now going to do these secondary attacks?
These operatives had been waiting.
Right. This was their key.
That's
so,
their cue. Time to go.
So
I think that was that was a nationwide concern. We all thought that. Like, I remember the RSA Tower in Montgomery shutting down because it was the tallest building in the region. So everybody evacuated that building because we didn't know if one was coming into that one. And all these buildings across the country started evacuating and going home and going back.
And folks don't realize how big of a prime military target Maxwell Air Force Base and Gunner is.
Sure.
As far as the intelligence of the Air Force,
Yeah.
It's a prime target too.
But so you get home that night and you tuck your kids in bed and you know that the Pentagon is still smoldering. There is days of rescue and recovery ahead. What were those days like?
Well, the first night was very interesting. So at about, we had just gone to bed, maybe. I don't know, one
It
or
was
two.
probably 1:30, 2 o'clock, something like
All
that.
of a sudden, air raid sirens start going off. What? So we're thinking, okay, here's, now they're going to do it at night when you can't see them. What's going on? They go off, and then all of a sudden we hear this jet come literally over our house or over bowling.
What?
What the heck? And then, so I'm out, I go out on my little patio, see this plane, and it lands at Reagan National. So,
And there are ATVs going up and down the little strips, with their M16s. Here we are trying to explain all this to our kids who are now freaking out because
They
the
heard
air raid
They
sirens.
heard an air raid
are-
siren.
And every plane in the country is grounded.
Is
Right,
grounded.
right,
There's
yeah.
and that was one of the most eerie things was being at Reagan, living at bowling, and there being silence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
It's never quiet.
It's never quiet. Never ever quiet.
Well, it is after, I think they close at midnight, but, they started early the next morning. But, yeah, but it was, and that was just eerie because we got home and death silence outside. You don't hear jets, you don't hear nothing, and then we go to bed, and then you hear this air raid siren, and then you hear a jet go over. And then I'll let you tell the backstory on that.
No, you can tell the
Oh.
backstory.
Well, Denise worked with a lady whose husband worked for FEMA. He was a high up in FEMA. He was an SES, which is the Civilian Executive Service. I forget what SES stood for, but
So many acronyms.
yeah, but he was basically a general officer equivalent for FEMA. He had been out, if you remember, just prior to that, that summer they had, I think this is, I got this right. They had a bunch of wildfires out near, I think it was Los Alamos,
Yeah.
that almost burned up to the base and all that. Well, he had been out there talking to them, helping coordinating, what FEMA could do, all this other stuff, and I didn't find this out till after the fact when we were talking to him that he got special. They wanted him back in D.C. They didn't want him stuck out in Arizona because they didn't know how long things were going to be grounded. So he got special permission to fly back, and they flew him into Reagan National.
And that was him. That was the air raid for
with
him.
a jet escort.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. But so
Good to be wanted.
yeah, but that was just weird in the fact that we knew who it was. And,
Yeah.
and we didn't
After the fact.
We found this out, I don't know, a month or so later when we. I
Like
think
our
it was
kids have been permanently damaged because you flew in.
Thanks a lot,
That-
buddy.
So the
Thanks a lot.
So the air raid siren preceded his landing? Is
Yeah.
that what,
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it
so you
was-
heard this air raid siren because I don't think the Air Force at the base knew what was going on. Obviously there were fighter jets flying around the whole time, but all of a sudden the air raid siren went off, and I didn't know anybody at bowling to find out
Unrecognized
was
plane,
this
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
did you was this on purpose or did you not know or what? So, but all of us.
Well, I mean, communications had to be just completely insane. We see all the stuff that goes on the outside, but on the inside, the actual military, it had to be just complete chaos.
I can only imagine because, like I said, cell phones were just starting to come in. Everybody was using the landline, and it was for us. That's all we had, and I can only imagine that the word didn't get passed to whoever, and they either saw a plane on radar. Hey, there's nobody supposed to be flying. What's going on?
Wow.
So
Or
needless to say,
it just may be a precautionary thing they just did anyway.
Yeah.
It's like, hey,
But that was
we know he's coming,
yeah.
but we're still going to fire the air raid
Could
siren
be, yeah.
to alert people that, hey, look, we know about this one.
Right. Yeah.
the kids slept in the bed the rest of the night with us.
I imagine I would too.
Yeah. It was.
And I can't even believe he slept.
We
I mean,
didn't.
No.
They may have, but we didn't.
Yeah.
No.
It was
So, I think it was. So anyway, life went on, and couldn't go anywhere. Little story I'll tell. So, the airmen were still doing their patrolling, and we went out one time, and I forget what day it was, but I don't know if it was lunchtime or dinner time. I said, "Hey, do you want something to eat? I mean, I know you get fed, but do you need any water or anything? And no, sir, I'm fine. I'm just, okay, because I felt sorry for him because he's just literally beating a path, walk back and
Right.
forth. But so anyways, so I guess I was home about 3 or 4 days, and then boss called my boss and he said, okay, we need to report to the Navy Annex on this date because that's where we're going to work out of. Okay, which is up the hill. Parking was going to be interesting. I think the first, because they weren't, the Navy Annex was just a row of 5 or 6 buildings that used to be all headquarters of Marine Corps, and then they eventually moved some of the staff down to the Pentagon. So there wasn't a lot of parking up there, but we all managed to do it. Our office moved up there, and
We still didn't have the car back.
no,
It's still in the lot.
Still
Yeah.
in the
Still in
Pentagon
the
parking
lot. So we got into new offices. Obviously, we didn't have any computers, so they had to scrounge up laptops. And the laptops were
Very thick.
2 inches thick at that time for us to work, and got to work in. And then I was asked to. They wanted people to go back to the Pentagon to get stuff out of offices. So I said, sure, I'll go. So they had a bus come up, a bunch of us, Marines, Navy, got on the bus, and we were kind of briefed that this is still a crime scene. Don't touch anything except what you have to touch. Don't, whatever you see, don't talk about. Okay. So, because there was a lot, we had people in our office, we had civilians, government civilians who worked for us, and there were some who had medications that when they were told to leave, they didn't think about having to grab medications and everything else. So literally we got a list of, okay, so-and-so needs car keys, this is where they're located, they need a wallet, this is where they normally put it. So we were going through offices searching for all this stuff.
It's like a grocery list.
Yeah, to bring back to other workers, and then we did our offices. Then we went to the outer ring, and started walking towards where the plane had hit, because there was Navy offices up there. So we were going there, and then one of the things that we were tasked to do was to take a look at what was on desks to see if there was any classified material out, so that it could be, we weren't to touch it. We just say, hey, there was classified material here, so that the appropriate people could come back in and gather that stuff up and safeguard it.
Right.
And I went into an admiral's office, and he had stuff out. But the thing I found amazing was it had only been about 5 days, and the mold that was growing in his office, because he was close to where, because again the roof of the Pentagon burned for days, and they were just pumping water on it. When we walked in, they were in the process of renovating the Pentagons, and they just put this new escalator system in, and there was literally, it was like a river. There was so much water flowing down that thing.
Wow.
It was amazing.
Fire damage and water damage.
Yeah. So it was that was pretty eye opening to me. What, when something's closed up and the power's off, what'll happen?
It goes to heck pretty quick.
Yeah. But that was surreal, just to see all the damage that was done, and that, hey, you're going in and getting stuff for people they need, but you're getting close to where people died, but you stopped at a certain point. Mm-hmm. And that's, don't go any further. Okay. And that's when I was telling you this. So there was another officer in our office who, all of us had volunteered for, they were taking people, asking for volunteers to go down and go through and search for remains, because he I don't think he told a story where so I think it was an army office. He went in and they found some remains, and he said the one thing that just stuck out to him, there was literally a skeletal hand still around a coffee cup.
Unbelievable. That just lets you know how violent,
Yeah.
how fast it was.
Yep, I mean,
You didn't have time to even let go.
They had no clue what hit him because he was in the outer ring, right where it hit.
And that was the area it hit was some kind of naval accounting area, I believe, in that E-ring.
Yeah, that I thought it was Army, but
Army accounting.
Yeah.
That's what it was. But so rescue and recovery ops continue for days and weeks. When do you finally return to the Pentagon?
see, I don't think it was it was in 2002, wasn't it? I think it was right around the end of the year because I retired no, it had to have been before that because my retirement at the Pentagon was in February
Of 02.
of 2002. So we were back in the office by then.
What was it like going back in there?
It was weird because it still smelled of smoke. You could still smell smoke.
Really?
You know, if you've been in I guess around a house fire or something.
Yeah.
You just smelled smoke all the time.
It gets in all the fabrics and everything.
Yeah. I mean, our office wasn't damaged. It had smoke damage, obviously, but there wasn't any water damage or anything. But you could still smell smoke. That's the one thing I remember when I first walked into the office.
And this country kind of went through the stages of grieving together, right? There was this overwhelming sense of panic and fear that goes to sadness for a short period of time, then to this swell of patriotism, and then to we want blood, we want vengeance for this, and then there was this huge military response that came with that. And many people criticize the response. Many people think it was appropriate. Some people think it wasn't enough. And still going on to this day is the military response from 9/11. What were your thoughts on that? Do you think that was measured appropriately? Do you think it was something we should have done differently, or was it what we should have done?
Oh, well, I mean, I think it's definitely what we should have done. Armchair quarterbacking is great, but I wasn't privy to a lot of the things that was going on. The one thing that just frustrated me is, early on, and this was, I don't remember how far after, but if you remember, they thought they had Bin Laden cornered, and but
A couple times
up in the mountains and couldn't get to him, and they were trying to develop all these big bombs to get him, and to me it was like, it sure would have been nice if we developed the right kind of bomb that could,
right,
and taken him out early.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of things would have been different if he was taken out a lot sooner than he was.
And actually let the country see a body.
Yeah.
That was another problem, that they buried him at sea, and we go. And at this point, the 9/11 conspiracies are popping up, and now we don't know what to believe anymore. And these crazy conspiracy theorists are starting to get traction because they won't shut up.
Right.
And you keep saying stuff long enough, it starts to become true to some people. But for everybody who was there on the inside, for the Marines and the Army and the Air Force that were working in those places at that time, know that this couldn't have been something that happened from the inside.
Oh, no. It was, I think everybody who was there, once they got over the shock, knew what happened. Like I said, when you go outside, again, working with pilots, you know what aviation fuel smells like.
Mm-hmm.
You know what it smells like when it's burning, and it made like I said, we all first thought it was a car bomb, just but it was like, where could a car bomb be? Because the whole building shook.
And you would think car bomb because car bombs happened before.
Right. Yeah. those kind of things happen, and but
It wasn't on the side where all the parking was either.
right. I mean, there was parking out front, but it was like,
And even though
Not that magnitude.
you were
Yeah.
talking about the Pentagon wasn't as secure as it is now, it's still the Pentagon. You're not going to be able to drive a car anywhere near it.
no, absolutely. I mean, I won't say that it wasn't secure, but I mean, it was, you didn't have that sense of an armed fortress before that, right? And after that, it was an armed fortress. Mm-hmm. I mean, they had, because before they had the Pentagon police. They were the people at the gates and all that. After that,
Military, right?
You had military guys, and you had military guys with M16s, and you had the Pentagon police there. So it was a lot more, and it was different. It was definitely different.
We'll hit on it a little bit, but how frustrating is it to you to hear the conspiracy theories that fly around out there that actually some folks try to give some credence to?
I'm
As a person that was there,
Yeah,
it's just like, hey, look, I was there.
all I can say is I've never had the opportunity to talk to someone, but I'm also of the mindset, hey, if you want to think that, you can think it. Go right ahead. It's just I know the truth because I was there. I mean,
Exactly.
I know what happened. So if you want to, get on a soapbox and say that it was all fake, it was an inside job.
Me and Will know an individual that
And they call them.
we used to have dealings with.
Okay.
That would if he ever hears this, his head's going to explode.
And these people that call themselves the ones that are telling this conspiracy, they call themselves the 9/11 truthers, and nothing can be further from the truth, right? The truth is it coming from a person who was there on the day of and the days that followed. You saw it all, and you stepped away from military. You retired in February of 2002. Right? Was that? I mean, that was fresh after 9/11. It's still fresh on the minds of everybody. And you retire. Is this something that was already planned, or was that something, or was it planned? You're like,
No,
can't leave now.
It was planned, and I went. Don't hate me. I went to my bosses and said, "Look, if you want me to stay, they could have done whatever they needed to do to, for me to stay if they wanted, but they said no, we don't. Just retire and go do something else." I said, "Okay." I said, "If nothing else, it saves another pilot. If because we all knew, hey, there's going to be a shooting war. Now, depending on how you want to characterize that, there's going to be a shooting war. And so I always said, look, if it makes sense to keep me here so you don't have to bring a pilot who's already trained here to do this job, I'm willing to stay." But they said, no, it's,
And what is it? And what plane did you fly? Did you pilot? Is the word?
Helicopters. Started out flying CH-46s, which have been replaced by the Osprey. And
Yes.
then, ended up flying Hueys.
The multi-talented super service helicopter, right?
And C-12s.
And I flew for a time when I was out in California. I flew C-12s.
Wow.
It's a multi-engine little plane.
And helicopters are a different animal than an airplane. I mean, you gotta really know what you're doing. I mean, the airplane guys, I mean, the flyboys, they all got their thing, but the helicopter, if you don't know what you're doing, you can get upside down real quick.
Yeah, that's a bad thing. Well, so I can't speak for other services. I just know in the Marine Corps, jet guys, when they have a problem, get to bail, eject.
Yeah.
Helicopter guys, we have to ride it to the ground.
That's right. That's what I'm saying. There's no out option.
Yeah, we don't get to parachute out. So,
But the unique thing about a military base is you put a Marine Corps Air Station, you can take any kid that's playing outside, a helicopter flies over, he can tell you exactly what it is without looking.
I got the sound of it.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
That's cool. That's cool.
But yeah, the whole conspiracy thing is just, I tend to, when I hear it, I just tend to tune it out because it's like, it's really not. It's not worth, to me. It's not worth putting a lot of energy into because, again, I was there.
Because the ones that will believe him are the ones that are going to want to believe it
Yeah,
anyway.
exactly.
They don't want to. They don't want to know the truth.
Right. Yeah. And it's like to me, I would. So if they think the whole 9/11 thing is a conspiracy, how do you explain the footage of the planes flying into the World Trade Center?
Exactly.
I mean, that wasn't an accident. In my opinion, if you look at historically some of the back in the day, what was it? A B-25 flew into the Empire State Building. Part of the plane was still sticking out of the building. So, and granted, prop planes and jets, they go faster, but still, it's like, it's. I don't see how you can look at that video and say, "Oh, this is fake." It was fake. Buildings aren't there anymore.
Right. And nor the people that were in those buildings or the people that were in those planes.
Yeah.
And they were. I mean, so the whole thing is ridiculous. But we live in a ridiculous time.
We do. Unfortunately, but
And like we said,
could you imagine if you had internet access like we have now, or information access back then? What the stories would have been coming out?
oh yeah, it would have been.
It would have just been complete insanity.
I agree with you.
But you would have also seen the plane going into the Pentagon.
Yeah, because they would have had
Exactly.
better.
They would have
better
had video of it.
Yeah, better cameras and everything like that now. So
Yeah, I mean, it's
because standard surveillance video back then was probably what 10 frames per second at the most.
yeah. It just yes. I attribute it to probably like a game camera. Mm-hmm. Take one
Exactly.
one picture and then there's movement again.
Yeah, I was being generous with 10 frames per second. I mean,
it looks like stop motion after a while.
Yeah.
But when Will mentioned earlier about the construction of the Pentagon having not having any steel, or not as much steel as normal buildings, so when you fly a plane into a solid brick wall and the number of brick walls that it went through,
You got through 3 of them, 3 of the rings, right?
there's nothing going to be left.
Oh,
Just stone and sand and
that was
jet fuel.
But yeah, like you were saying, without the steel infrastructure in it, it's just going through brick.
right. Yep.
Solid walls.
And that was another theory or another rumor that was going around, that the plane had gone all the way through all 5 rings, and was sitting on in the courtyard inside. It's like, well, but again, those of us who were there, we didn't know because we were told to leave. It wasn't until after when I went back, okay, people were saying it was all the way through.
Yeah.
But
It got more than halfway through, which is just incredible in itself. The power of that plane, that thrust and coming through there, that speed is just unbelievable. But 2022 now, you guys are happily situated in Prattville, Alabama, and I'm so proud to know you both. I mean, your story that you share with us today. I mean, I know, Pete, you said that it's a day you want to forget.
It is. I mean, I say that I'm not trying to be, it's to me, it's more about, it's a day that impacted me in a way that I never thought would, because again, being a pilot, if something ever happened to me, Denise and the kids would have to deal with it on their own. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was the nature of the beast, right? When I left every morning, she didn't know if I was going to be coming home at night. When I went on deployment, she didn't know if the chaplain and a couple guys in dress blues were going to knock on the door. But when you're there, and then afterwards, you realize, if we hadn't had a meeting and I had been out walking to go someplace and been walking by there when it happened,
Could have been you.
I would have been one of those casualties. So it and that's what I'm saying. It's one of those days that just because of the how it affected me and our family. That's one that it's like I recognize it, but I don't do a lot. It's not like the 4th of July or something like that.
Sure.
Sure.
And we're not special.
Yeah. Oh no. There are.
He came out of the Pentagon. There were those families that lost.
I mean,
people.
184 souls lost at the Pentagon that day.
Right.
2,977 lost that day overall. and 184 at your office.
I mean, it's. I mean, like I said, I don't know anyone who was killed that day. All of my friends and all my coworkers, we all survived. And so I'm not special. And then maybe that's why, I don't look at it that way, because I'm not special. I just happened to be there, and I survived. But it wasn't like I was beating back flames or anything to get out of the building. So, but there were people who didn't, and those people who didn't survive, I can only hope and pray that they died instantly.
Right.
Because just the whole conflagration of, I don't know if that's the right word, but
we'll take it.
It just boggles my mind that, and there's I don't remember the individual's what he did for the Marine Corps. I think he might have been a general counsel, but he was in that area. And the same individual who told us about the skeletal remains around the coffee cup, he went in to his office and brought his Marine Corps flag out and marched it up to the Navy Annex. But he was talking to one of the, I think it was an enlisted Marine in that office at the time. He said, the whole thing, the impact was so great, it threw both of them out of their chairs onto the floor. They didn't know what was going on.
Wow. Oh man, and that's well removed from the zone.
They were closer to where the plane hit. But it didn't. Their office wasn't engulfed. It was just wrecked.
Yeah.
But still, it's just like.
But normally, when something like that, when something tragic happens to a family, a lot of times it affects just one member of that family. It affected Pete in one way, it affects me in another way, and it also affects our two children.
Right.
So all four of us have a different perspective of that day. Even though we share things that happen to us together, each of us has a different piece. And actually, this is the first time that we have publicly talked about it. It's just one of those things that we really. It's very private.
Sure.
It's something, because it is so emotional.
Yeah. That
we just choose to honor those individuals privately. We love the patriotism that goes on, but it's just something that's so close to home that we always say that's the day that we would always love to forget.
Oh yeah.
Because we didn't want to live it.
You didn't ask for that.
It's kind of like, my dad fought in World War II, and there's a lot of other, were a lot of other World War II vets who didn't talk about what they did. That was their generation. You don't talk about that stuff, and that's kind of the way I look at it too. Is like, it's something that happened. I acknowledge I was there. I acknowledge it, but I don't talk about it that much, And the whole patriotism thing you were talking about. The one thing that made me feel really good afterwards was, I don't know if you remember, but right afterwards, the little stick on American flags you put on your car, to see the number of cars in D.C. driving around with those it warmed the heart, because, politics being politics, you're in D.C., even though you're in the military, you're going to deal with politics, right? Because it's there. And to see everybody in that city come together, it didn't last long, but still,
it was there.
It was there, and it was like, being in the military, it made you feel good. It's like, okay, these civilians here understand what we do, and that we, as in the military, we are willing to give up our life for this country, and even though there were civilians who died that day. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I believe they had that same credo, that they were willing to sacrifice their lives for the greater good.
Oh, there's no question, and you're welcome to say that you're not special all you want. But I don't have to say that. You guys are very special to us. And this story and the things that come out of this and the whole thing is just, I mean, 9/11 is not, it's a patriotic day, but it's not, you're just not celebrated like the 4th because it's so somber because of the stories like this that come out of it. And we live, I believe, I know you do too, in the greatest country in the world, the greatest social experiment ever conceived by man. God has blessed this nation so richly, and there's no nation that is more giving, that is more diverse, that is more open, that is more open-fisted than this country, the United States of America. And we have people in power right now, in office and on the streets and in daily life that want to forget the events of this day, or write it off as something that's past. And I feel like if we don't learn, if we don't embrace our past, that we're destined to repeat it. And I know you remember, I remember, Millzer remembers the swell of just unity that existed post 9/11 all the way up into the early 2000s. It's gone today. It's totally gone. And we're infighting over just ridiculous things that was so clear to us all in 9/11, on just basic things like gender identity and things like that. And we're coming apart over things like this. And meanwhile, those that would seek to do us harm are just watching this whole thing. And it's almost like we're setting ourselves up to go through this again. And I think it takes people like you and like Denise and like Stacy and like me that have this love for the country to do our part to kind of help stem this. And you, Pete, I mean, what you share with us today is just to hear you talk about these things. It gives me hope for one, but it also takes me back to those days, and it becomes all the more real to us again. And so I know if it's hard for me to hear it, it's got to be infinitely harder for you to share it. And so I'm thankful that you did today. I think our listeners, our subscribers to this podcast are going to be better for hearing it. It just reminds us that there are people right here in this community that were there that day that could tell you exactly what it was like. And I'm just proud. I'm proud to know you, proud to call you friends. And so is there anything else that you want to add to put a button on this whole thing?
No, I just think we just need to just pay honor to those that didn't come out that day. And for all the first responders and those people that did run back into the building and risk their lives to save those that could not get out.
Yeah, and I think, I grew up, like I said, my dad was in World War II, so Pearl Harbor Day was a big day for him. He was in the Navy. He wasn't there, but, there were certain things that that generation would do to remember things. And I think, to kind of go along with what you said, we as a country, I think, have forgotten that.
Yeah.
I mean, I to this day, I remember when President Reagan went over to the 45th anniversary of D-Day, was it? Mm-hmm. It was, politicians don't do that anymore. At least I don't think so. And I think that we as a nation just need to really take a step back and, like you said, rather than arguing about gender identity, proper pronouns, all this other stuff, we really need to look at what makes this country great. What have we sacrificed?
What brings us together, not what divides us.
That's right. Yeah. Because if we do that, there's a lot more that we have in common than what we don't have in common.
Exactly.
I think we'll find a lot more common ground if we just seek it, if we just look for it, instead of trying to find the things that we can divide on. Right. Mm-hmm. And so we can leave it at that. But I just want to thank you guys again for coming in. I know this is very difficult for you guys to share this story. I understand the privateness of it and how you pay homage to those that didn't make it out. You're one of the lucky ones that did. And I'm grateful you did because I get to know you. So you guys, I pray that God just continues to bless you. And I'm grateful. We're grateful. The Preferred Experience podcast subscribers are grateful and blessed for having you with us today. So on this 9/11/2022, we thank you for coming in. And thank you for your service also.
Thank you.
And when I say thank you for your service, I'm talking to both of you because it's a family affair when you got a military family. Am I right?
It is.
Yeah, it definitely is. Definitely is.
All right. Well, again, thank you for Pete and Denise Groghan. For the Millzer, I'm Will Barrett. As always, good night, God bless, and go Lions.